Chances are you've heard the phrase, never judge a book by its cover. Turns out that's one of the biggest lies you've ever heard. Right up there with, I'm fine, no honey, I don't think she's hot, and the ever popular, I was stuck in traffic. As it turns out, most people judge books by their covers, and so if there's one video you need to watch when you're trying to make it as an author, it's this one, because today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know to make sure your book has the cover it deserves. Let's get started. Hello everyone, my name is David Webb and I made this channel to give you the best tips on writing and creativity so you can finally finish your book or have that creative career you've always dreamed of. So why are book covers so important? Well, human beings are visual creatures and they make first impressions very quickly. So when your book cover is the very first touch point that your potential readers have with your book, you need to make sure you make the right first impression. In fact, making sure that you have a stellar book cover is so important that a lot of publishing experts recommend spending money on a book cover before you spend money on editing. And if you only have money for one of the two, they recommend that you spend it on a book cover. As it happens, you could write the best book since Les Miserables, but if you don't have a good cover, you won't get the readers. I know I make it sound like the best thing that you can do for your book is to make sure it has a good cover, but in a lot of ways it is. So what's the secret? How do you make sure that you have a good book cover? Well, there are 5 things that you can do to make sure that when potential readers see your book cover, they click instead of keep scrolling. Number 1, you need to know your genre. Love them or hate them, there are certain tropes, colors, and even fonts that are associated with your particular genre. Elements that your target audience loves to see on your book covers. And when you don't deliver, you run the risk of people passing over your book without even realizing it. Some people hear this advice and say, yeah, but then my book will look like everyone else's. Well, yeah, to some extent, that's the point. When your book looks like it belongs next to a bestseller in your genre, that's how you get people to buy your book. Obviously, you don't want your cover to be a carbon copy of similar titles, and a professional designer can do a great job of making it look like your book belongs while also being unique and standing out among the crowd. But giving your book a cover that is properly aligned with what readers are already seeing on the shelves is the number 1 way to get more people to consider buying your book. So what do you need to do? You need to look at hundreds of different books in your specific genre and find out what they have in common. Are most of them focused on a character or a symbol? Are the fonts intense or gentle? Are the colors bold or muted? Find out the common themes in these books that yours is going to be on the shelf with, and you'll have a great place to start with the design of yours. Number 2, don't design it yourself. If you design your book cover yourself, chances are it's going to suck. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people post nonsense like this in Facebook groups, asking for feedback and genuinely thinking it's good. I wish I were kidding. This is barely an exaggeration. Barely. And if you're good with art, even if your design skills rival Michelangelo's, you may not have the right perspective. Well, what are you talking about? I wrote it. Who else would have a better perspective? A professional book cover designer, that's who. As it turns out, the secret to good book cover design has nothing to do with what your story is about and everything to do with matching it to your target audience, as we'll get into here in a second. Trust me, I'm a Photoshop expert and I spent hundreds of hours designing and perfecting this cover. And while it is arguably gorgeous, it has next to nothing to do with the target genre of young adult dystopian. Maybe fantasy, maybe science fiction, but not quite dystopian. After leaving that book on the shelves for way too long, I finally hired a designer and got this. A cover that perfectly matches my target audience and still looks amazing. As it turns out, when we're the ones who write the book, we are way too close to the source material and are therefore too subjective to make a good book cover that will actually sell to the target audience. You may think you're the exception, but trust me, you're not. Hire a designer. Number 3, you need to hire the right designer. As a good rule of thumb, you want to hire a designer who has shown success in your specific genre. You want to hire someone who knows what readers expect to see, from tropes to colors to fonts. You'll also want to hire a designer who knows what they're doing. Usually, but not always, this directly correlates to how much the designer charges. I've found a good rule of thumb to be that anything less than $100 is bad to decent. Anything from $100 to $300 is good to great, and anything above that is amazing to phenomenal. Of course, there are exceptions in each price range, but in the overwhelming majority of cases, these guesstimations are pretty spot on. If I were just starting out and didn't have a lot of capital to work with, I'd aim for somewhere between $100 and $300. Sure, undoubtedly, a more expensive cover would surely be better, but at a certain point, you start running into diminishing returns. For example, a $1,000 cover would maybe get 10 to 20% more readers than a $300 cover, whereas a $300 cover will get you anywhere from 50 to 3,000% more readers than a $50 cover. Again, these are not hard numbers, and they're different for everyone. For me, I've paid $150 on a cover before, but I'm also about to pay about $650 for an upcoming release. When it came to redesigning this cover, I went with Mibble Art because they demonstrated an expertise across a wide variety of genres, and I particularly liked what I'd seen in their dystopian portfolio. They seem to have expert designers in just about every genre, but especially if you're writing a fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian, or paranormal, Mibble Art is an incredible option to choose from. They're also based in Ukraine and donate a percentage of their profits to the Ukrainian army, and so by supporting them, you're directly supporting people who really need our help right now. If you use the link in the description below, you're also supporting this channel. And finally, you'll also get a cover that gives you a fighting chance in your specific genre, not to mention one you can be proud of and looks amazing.
That's a win, 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 win.
If you're getting any value out of this video so far, do me a favor and hit the like button. It's free, so why not? And comment below the word corn for a free 1-chapter evaluation of your writing. This offer is good until the end of September because I don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. 60 years into the future because some colonizer on Mars wants to get better at showing and not telling. Back to the video. Number 4, be ready to share the load.
Share the load. The load. Get away!
The truth is that your designer will not be making this cover alone. They will need your input and feedback to make the perfect cover. Here is where your expertise as the author comes in. You intimately know the themes and motifs that your cover needs to communicate to your reader at a glance. In my case, I wanted to show that my book is set underground, and I wanted to communicate the concept that my main character spends most of the book on the run. Mibble Art took these ideas and nailed them, in my opinion. The stalactites and the boulders get this idea across pretty well, and you can see for yourself that the main character is in motion, looking over her shoulder, a concerned and anxious look on her face. But when I first got the concept art from the designer, it primarily showed the main character running, and it didn't include the boulders or the stalactites, or a couple other details. They needed my input to add more detail in certain places, to clearly communicate the vibe of the story to the reader. This is how the designer-author relationship should work in most cases. The best of the best designers might be able to do it all themselves, but you'll also be paying $1,000 to work with them, and you do run the risk of a slight disconnect between the finished result and your story. On the other hand, you might insist on dictating every last detail of the cover yourself, and if that's the case, you're probably better off just designing it yourself for free, since the cover will probably fail to attract the target audience. No, the process must be a balanced one, and you need to be ready to pull your weight. And finally, number 5, you need to test your cover. This is one of the most critical parts of the process. You might think your cover looks good. Your designer might think your cover looks good, but until you've shown it to someone who would actually be reading your book, you have no idea what your target audience will actually think. After all, they'll have an entirely different perspective than you and your designer. It's also a good way to market yourself and generate some excitement for your upcoming release. If you don't have a mailing list yet or any other way of contacting your potential readers, you still have options. You can go onto Facebook and join reader groups for your target genre. Trust me, they're very opinionated, and a lot of them would be more than happy to give you their thoughts on your cover. Just make sure you follow the group rules when you're posting so you don't get flagged for self-promotion. Of course, what you don't want to do is take 1 or 2 negative comments and completely blow them way out of proportion and think that you need to redesign your entire cover. Of course, if you spent $5 to $50 on a cheap design, you might need to do exactly that. But what you don't want to do is focus on the 1 or 2 people who really hated your cover and prioritize their inputs over the 50 people who like your cover but have ideas on how it could be better. What you need to do is take all this feedback with a grain of salt, filter through it all, and find the gold nuggets that will polish your art and turn it into exactly the cover that your readers are looking for. And that's it. If you follow these steps, you'll have a cover that fits your genre and your book, and one that will generate the interest you need to be competitive as an author. For those of you who clicked on this video wanting to know exactly how to design your own cover, I'm sorry, but you're also the people who needed to see this video the most. Notice that this video is subtitled Everything Authors Need to Know and not Everything Designers Need to Know. You can shoot yourself in the foot and design your own cover if you want, but don't be surprised when it doesn't end well for you. Bite the bullet and cough up the money for an actual designer. You'll be glad you did. For all things writing, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. My name is David Webb, and until next time, get some writing done.